They were incorporated into the British Cape Colony, which now covers the entire territory of South Africa. The Second Boer War was notable for the British use of camps to hold Boer civilian women and children, which later became infamous during World War II under the Nazi regime in Germany. More than 27,000 Boer women and children died in these camps. The Union of South Africa was granted nominal independence from the British Empire in 1910, but full independence was not formally adopted by the British Parliament in London until 1931. During this period, segregation and discrimination between blacks and whites existed, but the apartheid system was not formally enacted until 1948 through a series of laws. The Afrikaans word apartheid, derived from the Dutch language, literally means separation or the state of being separate. The apartheid laws were prompted by the influx of blacks into urban areas during the rapid economic development of World War II, which led to tensions with the white minority. The laws divided the population into four groups: white, British or African, black, colored or mixed race, and Indian, the latter of whom had migrated in large numbers from India with the British Empire's trade in the previous decades. The groups were forced to live in separate areas, while beaches, hospitals, schools, and other public areas were reserved for each group, with whites receiving the largest share. Intermarriage between groups was prohibited, and to ensure their grip on power, only whites could vote in government elections. At the same time, the government created Bantustans, or homelands for the black population, which were intended to eventually become independent states as a concession to more liberal African intellectuals and as a justification for the policy of apartheid in the major towns and cities where whites lived. Although these four homelands were granted full independence by South Africa, none were recognized by the international community. The apartheid system was condemned by the outside world, and in the following decades, the system was eventually destabilized by the increasing restrictions and unrest in black townships, resulting from the openly declared armed struggle of the African National Congress. This growing pressure forced the ruling National Party to lift the ban on the ANC, leading to the release of its leader Nelson Mandela in 1990. In the following years, the end of apartheid in 1994 brought a peaceful transition to majority rule, with universal suffrage for all South Africans, regardless of race. For the past 3 decades since the end of apartheid, the ANC has been in power, winning every election. During this time, the fortunes of the black majority have improved, but unemployment rates remain high, with most still living in relative poverty compared to whites, Asians, and coloreds. The country has been particularly hard hit by the ongoing AIDS epidemic, which has reduced life expectancy from 62 to 52 years between 1992 and 2005. But the biggest problem for all South Africans is the country's high level of violent crime. South Africa has a murder rate 5 times higher than the global average and the 6th highest in the world. In this regard, although South Africa's murder rate has halved from its peak in the 1980s, South Africa was second only to Colombia when Colombia was at its height in the drug cartel wars. The country has the world's largest private security industry, larger than the combined size of the police and army. Geopolitically, South Africa has been non-aligned since World War II, while other developed countries, which were traditionally considered Western powers, were isolated by its apartheid policies. Today, it is one of the S in the BRICS group, non-aligned, almost developed countries, the others being Brazil, Russia, India, and China. In the Cato Institute's Human Freedom Index, South Africa ranks about midway due to safety and security issues, the judiciary, the size of the government, and red tape. South Africa is highly unusual among countries in that it has no official capital. Parliament is located in Cape Town, the executive branch is located in Pretoria, and the Supreme Court is located in Bloemfontein. Parliament is bicameral, meaning it has 2 chambers, the lower house of the National Assembly, consisting of 400 members elected every 5 years by proportional representation from constituencies of equal population. The upper house of the National Assembly of Provinces has 90 members, of which 10 are elected from each of the country's 9 provinces by the respective provincial legislatures. The head of the executive branch, the President of South Africa, is elected by the National Assembly's deputies and is not directly elected by voters. At the end of a vast continent lies a land of deserts, bushveld, grasslands, and savannas. With the largest number of proto-human fossils anywhere, it is called the birthplace of mankind. In more recent times, it has been a land where native and foreign cultures clashed, and in that clash, laws were enacted for segregation and discrimination. Today, free from that past, the country now sees itself as a rainbow nation of ethnic diversity. It is a country of incredible wealth, stunning landscapes, exceptional plant biodiversity, and safaris. It is a country with the highest concentration of gold, diamonds, and mineral resources anywhere on Earth. Only one country can claim to possess all of these. Only one country is South Africa. South Africa is a medium-sized country located at the southern tip of Africa and is home to a diverse range of people from 3 continents. Its name is unique among all countries in the world because it defines its geographical position with respect to a continent. It simply says it is the southernmost part of the African continent. Humans and their hominid ancestors have inhabited South Africa for millions of years. In fact, the largest and oldest collection of hominid fossils has been found in the Cradle of Humankind, a UNESCO World Heritage Site located just 50 kilometers west of Johannesburg, dating back 3.5 million years. Our species, Homo sapiens, has inhabited the region for at least 170,000 years. Direct descendants of this first wave of human migration are still present in the region today, in the form of the Khoisan people, formerly known as the Hottentots or Bushmen, noted for their great hunting and tracking skills. Bantu-speaking peoples, who were farmers skilled in iron smelting, migrated south from Central Africa 3,000 years ago and reached eastern South Africa as early as 500 AD and are, among other groups, the ancestors of today's Zulu people. European contact with the Portuguese began in the late 1400s with Portuguese exploration, which was part of the sea route to their trading posts in India around the Cape of Good Hope. But the Dutch were the first to settle here, with the Dutch East India Company establishing a colony at Cape Town in 1652 with the aim of creating a sustainable local agricultural economy that could eventually supply ships sailing from the Netherlands to the Indonesian Spice Islands. The Dutch farmers, who brought slaves from Indonesia rather than enslaving the local population, moved north and east and soon encountered the Xhosa, a Bantu-speaking people, in a series of battles in the Great Fish River region near present-day Port Elizabeth. In 1795, the British captured Cape Town, preventing it from falling to the French during the Napoleonic Wars, and at the end of the war in 1815, the Cape Colony was formally ceded to Britain, and British settlement began in early 1818. Many independent-minded Dutch settlers resented British rule, and in 1818-1836 migrated north from the eastern Cape Colony on the Great Trek to establish the newly independent republics of the Orange Free State and the Transvaal. During these treks, these armed settlers, known as Boers, engaged in an inconclusive war with the Bantu-speaking tribes of the region, particularly the Zulus, whose kingdom was becoming the dominant indigenous power in the region under their King Shaka. Efforts to further establish European control over the Transvaal increased with the discovery of diamonds in the Kimberley in 1867 and gold in the Witwatersrand in 1884. By 1898, the region was producing about a third of the world's gold. In 1905, a colossal diamond was discovered near Pretoria. The Cullinan diamond, weighing 3,106 carats, 1.37 pounds, 0.62 kilograms, is the largest diamond ever found, and its largest pieces are now the centerpiece of the British crown jewels. The discovery of this mineral and the inability of the Boers to deal with the Zulu threat inspired the British to bring their imperial power to bear in 1879. Although the British ultimately defeated and disbanded the Zulu kingdom in this brief battle, the Battle of Isandlwana, which saw the Zulu victory, is notable for the fact that a small African force armed with primitive weapons was able to defeat a global imperial power. With the British now in control of the region, they turned to suppressing the independent Boer republics with the aim of creating a federation of southern African states under British rule. The First Boer War between the British and the Boers of 1880 to 81 was inconclusive due to the successful guerrilla tactics of the Boers. However, the British, working relentlessly to achieve their goals, returned in greater numbers and with different tactics 20 years later in the Second Boer War of 1899 to 1902. They eventually defeated the Boers, ending their independent republic by the people. The country is divided into 9 provinces, with limited powers of self-government, and each province has its own legislature. The provinces are further divided into a total of 52 districts and 205 local municipalities nationwide. The current flag of South Africa has been in use since the end of apartheid in 1994. The Y shape represents the coming together of the country's different ethnicities and traditions. The red and white bands are similar in color and position to those of the Netherlands, and the same colors as Great Britain, and represent European influence, while the black, yellow, and green are taken from the flag of the ANC and represent the indigenous African elements within society. In 2000, the coat of arms was replaced by the older version used since 1930 to reflect the new era after apartheid. It generally represents a bird hatching from an egg, symbolizing a new beginning for the Rainbow Nation. This motto, which I will not attempt to pronounce because I have not mastered the consonant click, is in the local Khoisan language and translates to "Diversified People Unite." South Africa's geographical situation is unique as it occupies the entire southern tip of the African continent. The Atlantic and Indian Oceans occupy the country's western, southern, and eastern borders, while from northwest to northeast, Namibia, Botswana, Zimbabwe, and Mozambique serve as the country's land borders. Eswatini, formerly known as Swaziland, is almost completely surrounded by the country to the northeast, while the country of Lesotho is located entirely within the country's borders. It is the 24th largest country in the world, with an area of over 1.2 million square kilometers, 1,221,037 square kilometers, 471,445 square miles. It would take you about 21 hours to drive the approximately 2,000 kilometers, 1,200 miles, from southwest to northeast along the country's longest axis. About half the time it would take to cross the width of the country in terms of distance and time. Its topography is dominated by a broad plateau ranging in height from 1 kilometer to over 3 kilometers, leaving only a relatively narrow lowland around the coast. This plateau ends abruptly at a point known as the Great Escarpment and creates numerous spectacular landscapes, especially in its eastern part, where it is known as the Drakensberg. Not to be missed, the southwest coast is home to the steep-sided ridge known as the Cape Fold Mountains, of which Cape Town's iconic Table Mountain is a part. It is South Africa's diverse geology that defines its rich mineral heritage. The bedrock in the northeast of the country is part of the Kapal Craton, a very ancient rock mass that is billions of years old, having survived countless continental collisions and rifting experiences, and, as a result, has retained a wide range of minerals that would otherwise have been lost much deeper into the earth. The climate is generally relatively dry and becomes drier the further west you go, resulting in a mixture of grasslands, shrublands, and desert biomes, which are surprisingly highly biodiverse. The warm Agulhas Current, which descends along the coast from the Indian Ocean, easily evaporates moisture to the east, while the cold Benguela Current from the Atlantic reduces evaporation from the sea and creates desert conditions on the land. Therefore, the wettest part is located along the narrow eastern coastal strip, which has a humid subtropical climate with year-round rainfall, with hot summers and mild winters. It is the only part of the country where forests are found. The humidity becomes drier but more extensive as we climb up the Great Escarpment and reach the plateau section known as the Highveld, where a subtropical highland climate with warm summers and cold winters prevails over a wide area. This region was naturally a form of savanna, mixed grassland and trees and shrubs, but is now extensively cultivated. Moving north from here, the elevation drops to the Bushveld and Lowveld, where semi-arid conditions occur, resulting in dry grassland and shrubland. In this region, we find the high density of wildlife and most of the safaris for which South Africa is known. Moving west from the Highveld, we encounter the large semi-arid plateau known as the Great Karoo. From here, the aridity increases to the west and north into Bushmanland and Namaqualand, where hot summers and mild winters and very little rainfall result in desert conditions. In the extreme southwest of the country, we find a part of the Mediterranean climate where westerly winds and sea storms bring rain in winter, but summers are dry. Here and along the southern coast, where easterly winds bring rain in summer, but where temperatures are mild year-round, we find a narrow belt of fynbos, a shrubland. It has an exceptional plant biodiversity, with around 6,000 species found here. These plants are located in their own flower kingdom, one of only 6 in the world, and the smallest in terms of land area. In terms of human geography, South Africa has a relatively large population of over 60 million, which is the same as Italy, France, and the United Kingdom, and the 23rd most populous country in the world. The population is mainly found in the northeast and east of the country, with the highest concentration around the colony of Gauteng province, including Johannesburg. Apart from the city of Cape Town and its surrounding area, the western half of the country is uninhabited. It is one of the most ethnically diverse countries in the world. Approximately 80% of the population is indigenous African, with 9% descended from Dutch and British settlers, 9% are colored or mixed race, and 2.5% are Indian. Notably, the white population was 22% in 1911 and 16% in 1980, which has decreased as a percentage. South Africa has 11 official languages, of which Zulu and Xhosa are the largest native first-spoken languages. Languages. Afrikaans, which is derived from Dutch, is the third most widely spoken first-spoken language. And although English is fourth in these terms, it is the language used throughout the country for business, industry, and education. In terms of religion, the vast majority identify as Protestant Christians, with no religion, traditional African beliefs, and Catholic Christians being a significant minority. South Africa has 5 cities with over 1 million people. The largest of these is in the Highveld, Johannesburg, the center of the mining industry, with a population of over 10 million in the greater metro area. Cape Town, the country's oldest city in the Western Cape, is followed by Durban, with around 5 million in the greater metro area. Durban, located on the country's east coast, has around 3.5 million people in its metro area. Pretoria, just north of Johannesburg, is home to about 3 million people, while Port Elizabeth, on the south coast, is home to over 1 million. With a GDP of around $419 billion, South Africa's economy ranks 32nd in the world. Although second only to Egypt and Nigeria in terms of size, it is the most complex and developed economy in Africa. Exports account for about a quarter of the economy, with gold and other precious metals leading the way. No discussion of the country's economy can fail to mention its mining sector. If ever there was a country whose development and growth were defined by mining, it was South Africa. For much of the 20th century, South Africa was the largest producer of gold. But as the productivity of its mines has declined, it now ranks only 11th in terms of global supply. But the country's rich geology means that it is not just gold that is found in abundance. It is the world's leading producer of platinum, accounting for over 70% of the world's supply, number 1 in chromium and manganese production, 2nd in titanium, palladium, and zirconium, 6th in iron, and 8th in diamonds. But this once dominant mining sector now accounts for only 7% of the entire South African economy, with the service sector having grown dramatically in the last few decades, and financial services in particular. Manufacturing accounts for about 13% of the economy, the largest of which is car manufacturing, with factories for Ford, BMW, Mercedes-Benz, Volkswagen, Toyota, and Nissan. Tourism accounts for about 10% of the economy, with the country's natural beauty and safaris being strong draws. However, due to the country's general aridity, the agricultural economy accounts for only 5%, the lowest in Africa, but it is notable worldwide for the fine wines produced in the Western Cape. Since the end of apartheid, there has been a significant brain drain from the country, with millions of white people leaving for careers in the developed world. The main reason cited for this migration is the security situation, and this is perhaps consistent with South Africa's highest income inequality in the world. Another key reason for white migration is positive discrimination or affirmative action policies enacted by the South African government that place white minorities at significant disadvantage in employment and business ownership. The country's currency is the rand, named after the Witwatersrand, where the gold mining industry began, and was introduced in 1961 shortly after the country became a republic. Prior to 1982, 1 rand was worth more than $1, but since then inflation has significantly reduced its value, and at the time of this video, it is trading at around 16 rands to the dollar. The rand is perhaps the best known. The Krugerrand, a 1-ounce gold coin featuring former President Paul Kruger on the obverse and the South African national animal, the springbok, on the reverse. At one time, these coins accounted for over 90% of all gold coins in circulation worldwide. South Africa's culture is a blend of European and African elements that reflect the country's diverse population. As a former British colony, British influence is strong in architecture, and a visitor familiar with Australia and New Zealand will see the general influence of white people on the culture, and indeed the popularity and international success of rugby and cricket, which were brought here by the British. Alongside its sporting success, South African music is perhaps the country's most significant global mark. Blending local South African rhythms, jazz, classical, and rock, it today has many different and diverse genres, and anyone with an interest in this sort of thing will instantly recognize South African music. And famous South Africans? Well, there's more to it than you might imagine. And as I wrap up this presentation, I'll leave you with something for the word of the town, and that's South Africa. If you enjoyed this video or found it useful, please like and share, and please let me know your thoughts in the comments, especially if you're from this country and if I've missed anything that you think is important. If you haven't already, please click the subscribe button so you don't miss future episodes. You can help support the future development of this channel by becoming a Patreon supporter for just $2 per month. Thanks again for watching, and see you next episode.